many wild and wondrous, such as those that surround the concrete Barents Sea. Ownership of them after the war and refused to let anyone else get close for several decades did little to dispel the most extreme of those theories. To some, the Soviet interest in the site confirmed that these were places that the Germans conducted tests on anti-gravity devices and weapons of mass destruction. There's been some speculation that this is the place that the Nazis worked on a top-secret project known as Die Glocke, or the Bell. Other than knowing what Die Glocke was supposed to do, aside from the fact that it was more likely that these were concrete bases upon which rotating artillery pieces were mounted. But that's far less fun to believe. There are people who live in the town of Swinton in North Yorkshire, England, who believe that there's an ancient temple in their neighborhood. Looking at Swinton Druid's Temple, it's not hard to understand why. It certainly has the appearance of something ancient, and the words Druid Temple ought to give a clue to its function. In reality, however, it was built a mere 2 centuries ago by an extremely eccentric landowner, William Danby, who lived in Swinton during the 1820s, was a wealthy and generous man who was concerned about rising unemployment in his hometown. To help solve the problem, he paid dozens of locals to build the temple for him as an effigy to Stonehenge. Once that was done, he offered a huge financial reward to anyone capable of living as a hermit in the middle of it for 7 years. Someone managed to stay for 4.5 years, but nobody managed all 7, and William's reward was never claimed. Even though it's not really an ancient temple, it's still visited by New Age pagans and Druids every summer solstice. Gungy Swamp in Groton, Connecticut, USA is the type of place that gives archaeologists and historians a headache. The settlement has been used and reused by a variety of settlers for at least 1,400 years, all of whom left their own mark on the landscape. There are stone chambers, stone rings, etching on the walls that don't correspond to any known language, and Native American artifacts. There are so many traces of human occupation in Gungy Swamp, it's impossible to say where one era of its use ended and the other began, or even who was the first there. One popular theory is that it was built in the 6th century by Celtic Christian monks who'd run away from Ireland to escape Viking raids. But that would rewrite the accepted history of pre-Columbian America, and also disregards several pieces of evidence that suggest the site is far older. Occasional spikes in electromagnetic activity have been detected at Gungy Swamp, which scientists put down to the composition of magnetite, granite, and quartz rocks. But conspiracy theorists buy into the idea that it's either an alien base or an energy vortex. One lithic stone tool found buried here is at least 3,500 years old, which blows a hole in the Celtic monk theory. We don't know whether it was built in stages or all at once, and frustratingly, we probably never will. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.
Camel, get out.
This is brilliant. This is obviously an iconic image. Taking a camel ride by the pyramids, surely it encapsulates the spirit of Egypt.
But such an image is completely misleading. Because there weren't any camels here when the pyramids were built 4,500 years ago. And that's the thing. Ancient Egypt is instantly recognizable, but all too often completely misunderstood. So, I'm gonna try and change that.
Good luck.
The Great Pyramid of Giza, final resting place of King Khufu, over 140 meters. No wonder it still pulls in the crowds.
See, I can't even listen to shit like this no more. As soon as you start talking about the pyramid is only 4,500 years old and it was a tomb for Khufu and Khafre and Tutankhamun, like, nah, that's not true. That's not true at all.
Hi, this is Brian. Today we're exploring a site you probably have never heard of called Abu Rawash. And at this location is this amazing piece of granite stone that has a curve to it and also has obvious evidence of ancient machining marks, which you will see. Where its original location was in relation to Abu Rawash known, but it's one of the best examples to linear machining technology possibly see. Abu Rawash is not open to the general public, but if you get special permission, you can go and explore it, and it's a part of the ancient system of pyramids located in the general Giza Plateau area. Most people think that the Giza Plateau is simply where the three great pyramids are, but that's not true at all. Here you can see that the casing stone of this once pyramid, pink granite, likely from Aswan, which is hundreds of miles away. And here you see the darkening of the inner core of the limestone. That apparently is intense heat. So it's another example of a location where an ancient pyramid was struck by an enormous amount of heat, likely around 12,000 years ago. And we also see evidence there. You see on the left-hand side of that pink material, that is the mortar that connected the casing stone to the limestone core. Example of granite. Again, it looks like it has been hit by an intense amount of heat. It's a recent revelation by our team as we explored Egypt in April of 2019. And in the center, you can see the darkening of the limestone, which apparently was done by heat. Major question regarding Abu Rawash, obviously was a pyramid at one time, is whether it was built or whether it partially deconstructed and the stone used at other locations long after its creation. This top of the pyramid is missing. Theories are that the pyramid and the pyramids of the Great Pyramid system were energetic or vibrational structures which in some way exploded around 12,000 years ago. Clearly, these were not ancient tombs. And again, the unique thing about Abu Rawash is this is the descending passageway into what was a pyramid. Again, look at the charring marks on the left and right-hand sides. They are descending into of this ancient pyramidal structure. You see the charred marks of the stone, probably not a localized fire, but something far more extensive. And it's at other locations in Egypt, such as Karnak, that again we see these strange high heat scorching marks. Now this is the interior of the descending passageway. You can see it's a combination of limestone blocks and then also the bedrock itself. This site is not open to the general public, as I said, but if you get special permission and a proper licensed guide, then you're allowed to visit it. Easy process, complex, and I personally have only been here twice, but again, probable that
Brushes
you've never
off real
heard
quick. We about
of
to
Rawash, but you can look it up on
switch
the
colors
internet
up and
see the
actually work on
description
his jewelry a
of
little
what
bit.
most academics think.
Start over here
it
with his
was.
bracelet.
Looking at the actual core
All right.
of the pyramid structure itself.
So.
And as you
I'm gonna
can
need a
see,
little bit.
mainly it's the bedrock itself. So the major question is, how was the bedrock cut in order to achieve this very deep shaft-like area? So it wasn't tools, and now a structure like this was not built by the dynastic Egyptians, but was inherited by them. Later on, probably used
For this
as
second layer, I
ornament,
can probably use some of the
possibly
colors I
by the
already have
Romans
on
or
here,
other
honestly.
culture. And
I
that
need a
is the
little bit
shaft
of yellow.
itself.
Naples. I
There
might
is a
grab some
taper to
Naples
it.
yellow
It's actually
real
wider
quick.
at the
Let's
top
see.
than at the bottom.
Some Naples yellow. It's right here.
Start back outside again. You can see that the pink granite was the casing stone locking into the limestone.
All right, a little bit of that. I might need a little bit of.
You see evidence of ancient scorching or charring marks.
Well, maybe not.
This.
Let's try to do it like this then. If we do it this way.
There again is the mortar material.
Still
It
pretty
looks like
wet,
a
isn't it?
mixture, pink granite and also the limestone. Some people speculate that it's a kind of geopolymer. Scientific testing will have to be done in the laboratory North America at some point in order to analyze the material and see if it's simply ground up granite and limestone or if it's more complex. You can see that the weathering is very excessive in some areas. It's again evidence of scorching. There is the pinkish mortar once again. So a lot of this mortar used. Actually, stunningly, it appears that the construction of the pyramid in some ways is sloppier than I expected. I thought maybe a thin layer of mortar would have been employed, but in some cases it was up to an inch or more thick, as you can see in the bottom of the video there. Lots and lots of mortar. That's when we go to places like the Bent Pyramid or the Great Pyramid. Again, mortar was used in the core, but not as much as here.
Damn, that sneeze fucked me up just now.
Some of the granite.
Man, that's really wet too. Damn it.
Decomposing in a very strange manner. Be the result of a burst of intense heat in the very distant past, because granite doesn't normally weather this way. And that was backed up by Susan Moore, who is our geologist who came with us on this day trip to amazing location. Once again, you see the charring of the exterior core of the pyramid, completely composed of limestone. Once again, some of the casing stone closing and crumbling in a very, very odd manner. This is the location of Abu Rawash, and soon you'll be able to see right there. There is the Giza Plateau that you know of in the distance. The thing is that from one site to the next, you can see the next series of pyramids. A strange, I don't know if this is an excavation, if it was part of the ancient pyramid, or if it was a boat pit. This was where a giant saw was located to blocks in its construction. The many similar ones on the Giza Plateau, which are called boat pits by most academics, but what the original function is, I think is, again, unknown. That's why it's great to go and visit these locations in person. Here again, we see strange discoloration of the limestone. This was the result of intense heat charring or not, I'm not quite sure. Once again, the strange erosion patterns of the core, or the exterior of the core of the once pyramid at Abu Rawash. The other intriguing thing is you can see that the bedrock slopes inwards towards the pyramid, and this was the case on all four sides. Of course, would make the pyramid much more stable. The stones would be pushing against each other, and it was obviously an intentional thing. Abu Rawash, a very curious site, and we may be going there on our next trip in March of 2020, if you'd like to join us. It's my book about Lost Ancient Technology of Egypt, Volume 2, actually. There's Volume 1, both available at Amazon. Consider joining us in Turkey in September of 2019. This tour is a go. We have enough people, but we would encourage more. And in January of 2020, we're going to explore Lost Ancient High Technology in India. If you're interested in any of these tours, please contact Patricia Lehman at HorusRising.com, and thank you for watching. So most academics believe quite strongly that all the ancient pre-Columbian work done in the city of Cusco, created by the Inca people, including this somewhat megalithic wall made out of very hard basalt stone, only had bronze tools. This is Spanish construction you're looking at, transitioning into Inca, made of limestone. But the Inca work is not as superior as what you're looking here. Precision of the joinery. This megalithic wall, made out of granite from a somewhat local quarry. Granite is much harder than bronze chisels. This is Spanish construction, as you can see, quite sloppy. It is the incredibly precise basalt work, I believe, and many others do now. This work was done by a culture that had lost ancient high technology and existed long before the time of the Inca. You're looking at here is the megalithic work built by the Inca. We're back with the pre-Inca work. Notice the incredible shiny surfaces in the horizontal joinery. Either like it was polished, or possibly even intense heat was used in order to fit the stones. In this other ancient wall, we see possible signs of catastrophic damage created by heat, possibly by an ancient cataclysm or even heat strike from the sun. And this wall tells the whole story. Notice the megalithic granite blocks on the right, later Inca work on the left. Inside of what is called the Coricancha, again, a basalt construction, the astonishing accuracy of the joinery. Again, could not have been done with bronze tools. Been done utilizing some form, or forms even, of lost ancient high technology. This work would be very difficult to do today, including this tiny stone put in there. We walk through the Coricancha again. We see astonishing accuracy. Walls average 3 feet thick, and there is no gap front all the way to the back. Lintel, or this recess area, you can see is almost perfectly level. Here in the side room of the Coricancha, we see shapes in their original places. Here be a machine drill hole. There's no other way this could have been done. Again, just showing you the accuracy of the horizontal joinery. Joinery, we see gaps, but that's because of a massive earthquake that happened probably in deep, deep antiquity. We are above Cusco at the ancient site called Sacsayhuaman. Sacsayhuaman is more than 600 hectares inside, or 1,200 acres. What we're looking at here is not so much incredible accuracy, but just very strange, heavily eroded surfaces, again, that had to have been done with some kind of lost ancient high technology. Here is limestone, but it has been metamorphosed, so it's much harder than bronze. Why were these recesses even made in the first place? Appear to be more than 5,000 of them in the Cusco area, and the erosion indicates thousands upon thousands of years of age.
Damn, I don't want to have to hold this stick. What if I put it up here?
Well, there are stories of tunnels.
Right. I need it closer.
Cusco
That's a little
area,
better.
ancient tunnels underground,
Right.
go supposedly miles upon miles. Theoretically goes from Tiwanaku in Bolivia to Cusco. Going to explore this little one. It could very well be natural in terms of formation, but it obviously appears, due to the surfaces, that someone, possibly the Inca, expanded the width and height of it in order to make it useful for ancient ceremonial purposes, or possibly even for conducting water. We walk through this tunnel, which in some areas is pitch black. Again, you see these polished surfaces, simply from people's hands. See some kind of ancient technology. We come through, we see the wall on the left-hand side. Come out of the tunnel.
Oh, I see. What the fuck happened
There
to
are
the
many strange, ancient, cut and eroded stone surfaces. What we're going to walk to is this giant outcrop of stone called the Chincana. Chincana in the Inca language means tunnel. So there is a probability that there is a tunnel entrance nearby this stone, which goes all the way to Cusco. You see eroded Inca stairs. Now we're looking down at the massive Chincana shape. We call this a huaca, which means sacred place. And again, there are many of them. As we approach the Chincana, again, you see all of the eroded and carved surfaces in the metamorphosed limestone, the actual ceremonial staircases, there doesn't seem to be a true pattern with them. This place, possibly 1 out of 1,000 tourists will see. It's very close to the huge Sacsayhuaman wall. Most people, most visitors, don't even know it's there. Why it's good to come with Hidden Inca Tours. We approach what is believed to be the front of the Chincana. Again, you see these very odd surfaces, almost as if the stone was molded in some way. As we walk over to the left, we'll see that a massive piece of stone has broken off. It has an internal staircase. Here you can see the pattern of the stairs going down in the center of the screen, and the internal staircase, the pattern of the internal staircase. Erosion, again, of these surfaces get very ancient. There are, in fact, 2 staircases. One is upside down.
What the fuck?
We have an Inca wall that is constructed, because at every ancient megalithic site we do see Inca presence as well. They revered these ancient places. The broken off staircase on the right-hand side, and then on the left-hand side where it used to attach. Finally, exploring more of ancient Sacsayhuaman. This wall is about 1/4 of a kilometer in the background. An area that could be Inca, but more likely it's much older because it was buried up until about 10 years ago. Once again, this area is about 1/4 kilometer from the famous huge megalithic wall. We're going to be looking at some more strange surfaces, and to see more, you'll have to see the next video, which will be coming up on my YouTube channel quite soon. Is this an upside down staircase? Was this giant block flipped over by a cataclysm? Here we are back up at Sacsayhuaman, which is located above the city of Cusco, and we're looking at obvious megalithic remains. Picture here, of course, of work done by the Inca, probably about 90%, but then we see clear evidence that the Inca discovered megalithic works done in quite hard, metamorphosed limestone. This is a clear example of that. These relatively flat surfaces that have been cut into the stone, clearly done by some kind of lost ancient high technology. As the Inca were a Bronze Age culture, there is no way that many of these surfaces were done by them. They were found by them. Also see cataclysmic damage here too, where these giant stones were snapped and even flipped over. Again, intriguing flat surfaces, and look at the cracks and breaks in the stone. It's clear that the flat surfaces were made first, and then some kind of cataclysm damaged these giant stones. This is a rhyolite stone outcrop located at Sacsayhuaman, and it's quite possible that this happened at the time of the ancient cataclysm about 12,000 years ago. It's a volcanic extrusion. Here again, more flat surfaces that some people regard as being quarries, but again, the Inca could not have efficiently cut this material. So it's very likely that the Inca found these megalithic sites and then turned them into places of worship and ceremonial spaces. Here we get our first view of the city of Cusco. Some people think that Cusco is a small town, but in fact, it's a population of between 500,000 and 1 million people. Here's where we're going to get our first view. Giant megalithic wall that the Inca found at Sacsayhuaman approximately 1,000 years ago. Some people call this a fortress. That's actually something that the Spanish conquistadors described it as. Do not know what the Inca used it for. Of course, we do not know what the original function was. It could have been a fortress, something much more complicated. The acoustics here are really quite profound. So was it possibly made as a ceremonial center by the megalithic builders? We're going to see how big these stones are. Look at the people in comparison to the size of these giant stones. Again, it's metamorphosed limestone, much harder than the bronze tools of the Inca. In terms of scale, some of these stones weigh 40 tons, and there are at least two, such as this one, that weigh about 120 tons. The quarry is approximately 3 miles away, and we've been there, and we can see no quarry marks. Once again, the sense of scale, and also how tight-fitting the stones are. Any gaps that are present are earthquake damage from the time of the cataclysm, maybe from Inca times, but it's a sense of size, scale, and precision which is absolutely profound. When you see smaller stones in the upper areas, that's an indication either of Inca repair or possibly even more modern repair work. And there on the right side, upper area, you can see the smaller stones. That is presumed to be Inca repair work done between 1,000 and 500 years ago. Both past these two giant megalithic blocks, have a look at the staircase. Notice that the stairs are made of small stones with mortar. So this is an Inca construction at the megalithic site. It appears that there were no megalithic staircases originally, which is very curious. Again, the stairs are Inca, smaller stones with mortar. Here we're going to see that the original megalithic builders, again, were working on a very profound scale. Everything is curved. You see polygonal stones and curved walls. It also appears that they made animal designs. This seems to be a snake design that was incorporated into the construction of the wall by the original mysterious megalithic builders. Atlanteans? Were they aliens? Or were they simply ancient Peruvians who had lost ancient high technology? It really looks as though whoever did this work was able to manipulate matter and make the stone soft for a very short period of time. Inca staircases, the profound nature of the megalithic builders. Able to manipulate matter in some way and temporarily make the stone go from a very hard consistency to almost marshmallow consistency. Have any form of technology like that. But he obviously did in ancient times. Once again, their perspective of the sense of scale and the tightness of the fit of the stone. And now we're at a location very close to Sacsayhuaman, which is called Kenko. And this again is a megalithic construction that was later adopted by the Inca. And what we're doing here is we're going into a long labyrinth. This could be a natural fissure, later shaped, megalithic builders. Lots of examples also that the Inca utilized this space or this area at Kenko, funerary services. This is where they mummified the high-ranking Inca people. Again, odd flat surfaces don't make any logical sense, at least not to me. Walk through, again we see flat surfaces, no evidence of tool marks. There in the center is a curious knob. What is it for? Another part of the labyrinth at Kenko, where the Inca did their funerary services. They did mummification on what we'll see as a massive polished slab. Again, they found it there. They didn't make it. But the Inca were very pragmatic people, and they would take an older construction and utilize it for their purposes. So there on the right is the shiny slab used for mummification. And now out we go, and Kenko is a massive, almost hill of one single piece of stone with lots of surfaces carved on top of it. As we walk through the city of Cusco, you'll see how complex the stonework is. You have megalithic work, then you have Inca work, and then you have Spanish colonial. That doorway there was originally megalithic, and next to it, some Spanish colonial work, even utilizing concrete as a mortar, and then original polygonal Inca, and another repaired section of wall, to polygonal Inca again. Every street in the ancient part of Cusco is super complicated in terms of construction and timeline. As we continue to walk, once again, you see the smaller polygonal Inca work, in a megalithic section of almost cube-like shapes. That stone is basalt, and it was brought from a quarry more than 50 miles away. And once again, here we have Spanish colonial on top, Inca repair using ancient basalt stone, and the original megalithic basalt construction. Again, basalt on the left, Spanish repair work, really quite sloppy, then original Inca. This is the metamorphosed limestone that is also found at Sacsayhuaman, which is about 1 mile away. The basalt quarry is 50 miles away. This wall appears to be a reconstruction effort by the Inca utilizing the basalt from, again, an ancient cataclysm. It's much older than the Inca. And finally, see is something that most people do not know about, and that is that the Inca had a glyph system. Those squares are called tokapu. So that is the glyph glyph language, the Inca people. First of all, we're at what is called the Inti Punku, located about an hour's drive south of Cusco, Peru, also known in English as the Sun Gate, and is a combination of megalithic construction, which the Inca found about 1,000 years ago upon their approach to Cusco, and they decided to rebuild it. So the large stonework is the megalithic basalt work that they found. Smaller stonework is what they added to the site. See the obvious difference between the Inca work on the left and then the megalithic work in the background. You'll also notice that the megalithic work has some major cracks and possible heat damage, so it may have been victim to an ancient cataclysm. One of the greatest sites to see the obvious differences between Inca construction and megalithic work that they discovered in the Cusco area and Sacred Valley. Each of the megalithic sites they adopted and then rebuilt, leaving the megalithic aspects intact. Look at the tightness of the fit of these stones, almost perfect. There are the curious knobs on the left, and once again the comparison between the Inca work and the megalithic work. So what does everyone think?
You said it's missing its legs, right?
Yeah.
So it's just a small child then, right?
I know, but look at the size of the head compared to the torso. They're about the same.
No, they give you the impression
Doesn't
it's a
make sense.
baby, like on YouTube.
Yeah, but a baby what?
It's a little.
And you say it takes 4 years to the information as gold as height.
Looks like it's almost wanting to be in the fetal position.
That's how they used to bury them that way, right?
And you see the fontanelle.
Mm-hmm.
Does it have the
It's
normal
big
number of
opening.
sutures?
Yeah, but it's missing 2 sets of ribs.
What is on the right side? The left over there.
Oh, that's a fetus that was found with it.
Oh, okay. So this is Mikey on the right side.
Mm-hmm.
So
Did you do DNA on this one?
Yep.
what is
Mother was Native American.
And you don't, this is where you don't know who father was.
Dad had written.
No. So, any thoughts as to what you're looking at?
Definitely.
I look in a child who have a fontanelle who is really open, and he must have been born like this.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you get him out with this big head?
Well, that's the question.
It was very
It's
painful.
birthed by a species
Nope.
that has a big head.
And if
No,
they-
but the mother was Native American.
For sure.
and if this was
Haplogroup
cranial
B4.
deformation,
We don't know if
haven't
Bonnie
been-
survived.
Well, Waikiki has been DNA tested 3 times. First by a Russian crew that did not give the results to Senor Renato, who was the caretaker. And then by a British crew who took some of the sections of ribs to be analyzed, did not give Senor Renato the results. And finally we tested Waikiki, and it turns out her mother was Native American of the haplogroup B4. So what was her father? We're going to do another DNA test probably in November of 2018. We're going to attempt to see if we can detect the DNA of the father, which is the nuclear DNA, and also the mitochondrial, which is the mother, to see if indeed it is B4. We're now at the Waro Museum, about a 10-minute drive from the last video segment you saw with Waikiki, the so-called human baby skeleton. And here we find ancient, look like pipe parts for water. These were clearly made using some form of lost ancient high technology. They're made out of basalt stone, and they are a minimum of 1,000 years old. The question is, how old are they exactly, and who created them? Once again, here is another section. You see that it's a right-angled bent pipe made out of basalt stone. It has a male and female coupling. Here are some glyphs located in the Watteau Museum. No one has been able to interpret what they mean. Again, they're likely to be at least 1,000 years old, and as far as I can tell, nobody knows what culture created them. Great little museum, a little bit out of the way, but about an hour's drive from Cusco. Yeah, it must have been a tube, like a tube drill of some kind. But the Inca only had bronze, so this is lost ancient high technology.
The thing is that it would be nice to see some spirals, because that would give you an indication of how fast the tool is.
They have to have something else, but it's the same mark.
So it would not be like something like a hole with teeth on the end of it.
No, you can tell what the tool they have used.
Okay, and now we're at Tipong, which is an Inca creation, and as compared to the megalithic work we were looking at, this is less sophisticated, but still the Inca were quite genius at being able to move water, as you can see here. This little waterfall, which is part of the irrigation system, is still running after more than 500 years. It goes from the mountaintops down through the agricultural area and down into the valley below, where it feeds even more agriculture. Here again is an example of an Inca wall construction. This is the second level at Tipong. Now we're at the third level. It actually goes up more than 5 levels and covers a very large expanse. It shows the very hard work and engineering skill of the Inca people. And just as a side thing, here we're at what's called the Cochahuasi Reserve. These are vicuña. And now we're going to walk into the pen that has an alpaca. So this is a family-run institution. They get no assistance from the government, and in that way they get no governmental interference. They simply collect animals found in the area that are usually injured or were kept as pets and then abandoned. And a great opportunity here to see one of the rare speckled bears, or spectacled bears, that live in the jungles, high jungles of Peru. The flight of the endangered condor. The Andean condor, there are only about 700 left in Peru, but they have a breeding program at Cochahuasi. You see the magnificence of an old condor. He's 60 years old. His name is Malku, and he'll probably live to be 90. We're looking at the ingenious way that local people still dye wool. It's back to Inca and pre-Inca times, and you can see the incredible variety of different colors that they're able to achieve. Absolute genius work by the indigenous people of Peru. And here is a traditional weaver working on a garment or textile. And something like this will take her probably about 2 months to complete. Now we're looking down into the Sacred Valley at Pisac. Pisac is a major Inca site, and here you're looking at huge terracing that the Inca did more than 500 years ago. This is more of the terracing at Pisac, an amazing achievement by the Andean people. To this, we're actually going to go into the complex at itself. Here we are at the entrance. We're walking towards the fortress area, which is the only official way to get in recent times, and also during Inca times. It's very narrow, so that an army that would try to invade would have a very difficult time and could easily be picked off by the Inca warriors standing above them. You can see only 2 or 3 people in width can walk into the official entrance of Pisac. Huge complex, almost the size of the more famous Machu Picchu. Cheaper to visit Pisac than Machu Picchu, and in some ways it's as equally interesting as Machu Picchu itself, though again, not so world famous. But if you do visit Peru, especially Cusco and Sacred Valley, it's a smart idea to visit as many of the ancient sites as possible, because each one does have its own character. Now we get to look at the main agricultural terracing system at Pisac. It is the administrative and royal center ground. You can see how the Inca terraformed the entire area, an amazing achievement that would have taken possibly millions of man-hours to do. And this gives you a sense of size of each one of these Andeni terraces. They are between 8 and 10 feet tall, and in the case of Ollantaytambo, which is another ancient Inca site, the terracing system, each terrace is at least 12 feet tall. So again, an amazing achievement by the Andean people. Now, as with other famous sites such as Ollantaytambo and Sacsayhuaman and Machu Picchu, there is a megalithic element here at Pisac. Look at the wall right in the background. You'll see it's of megalithic nature. It was created long before the Inca using lost ancient high technology. The stone is not from this area, but it's from a quarry probably at least 40 miles away. Very hard basalt stone. So the Inca found this megalithic wall and constructed their Inca Pisac around it. Here once again, walking past Joaquin here, through the megalithic doorway, and then back out to the Inca period with one look back at what's left of the megalithic wall. So if you're going to visit Machu Picchu, definitely take time and also visit Pisac, Ollantaytambo, Sacsayhuaman. Now here's a little brief view of the next video or part of it. This is world famous Machu Picchu. And there is the classic view that you see in photographs. The conventional story about Machu Picchu is that it was constructed in the 15th century from scratch by the Inca and took approximately 25 years to build.
Take a bathroom break now.
However, you're going to see some artifacts that don't fit the paradigm that the Inca could have constructed it. This is a possibility. This is the so-called sacrificial stone. There's actually no evidence whatsoever that the Inca did human blood sacrifices at all. That was likely made up by the Catholic Church to shame the Inca descendants. Now, mountain in the background, which we'll see in a little bit, the actual mountain of Machu Picchu. Here we see Sacred River below. Wilcanota, of course, is the main part, citadel of Machu Picchu. Is Machu Picchu Mountain. The name of the city has been forgotten. It's just that academics decided to call it Machu Picchu because it's located on Machu Picchu Mountain. What we're going to do is, this is going to be a virtual tour, almost all of Machu Picchu. In order to properly see it, actually takes a few days because it is huge in scale. This is just a portion. It's the main part, but just a portion of the Machu Picchu complex. And there is Huayna Picchu, the mountain in behind. Huayna Picchu means young peak. Picchu means old peak. Another breathtaking vista of looking down towards the main ceremonial and living center. And of course you see all of the terracing system, all sides of this incredible place. So looking out at the other mountains in the area, down to the Wilcanota River again, across to the main part of the complex, which we're going to be exploring in just a few minutes. Once more vista to allow you to see the magnificence and my head of the Machu Picchu area. Actually highly likely, or most probable, that the Inca discovered Machu Picchu, and then they were so blown away by the mastery craftsmanship of the core area that they decided to make it a major center. So now we're walking down through the terracing system, and eventually we're going to approach the core part, and the core is where we find ancient megalithic aspects which the Inca could not have constructed, so clearly they discovered part, which comprises about 5% of Machu Picchu, and then they built over the course, most likely of centuries, the whole complex, because it is absolutely huge. So here we are walking down the main ceremonial road that actually leads to Cusco, if we go backwards. And this is one of two major ways in ancient times to get into Machu Picchu. The other one is on the backside of Machu Picchu Mountain, would lead you to the last Inca city called Vilcabamba or Wilcabamba. And this is the main gate in traditional times into Machu Picchu. So this is how the royal Inca people would enter Machu Picchu from the city of Cusco, which was of course their capital. And what we're seeing is Inca period construction. See, there are gaps in the stonework. There's some filling that was done with small stones and also clay mortar in some cases. It is possible that this main gate was originally megalithic and was rebuilt by the Inca. Notice the small stones on top. Are proceeding down towards the ceremonial core, and here we're looking at basic Inca construction. Back, that's part of this adventure.
Here again, Inca construction. Rough, various sizes of stones put together. Those surfaces are especially well done. All of the stone of the construction of Machu Picchu came from the mountain itself. It's all white granite. All of these mountains in the area are all solid white granite. The curious thing about Machu Picchu is that you can see they're big flat surfaces, whereas all the other mountains in the background are peaked or rolling. And here we see a giant stone. This is part of the quarry that the Inca used. They took advantage of the cracks in order to be able to split the stone. And now we're starting to approach the megalithic part of Machu Picchu. Again, most visitors don't even notice the difference between the wall on the left and the wall that you're looking at in the background. Here we have relatively rough Inca work, and here again, in this incredibly fine craftsmanship. Granite is a very hard stone, so the bronze tools of the Inca would have been useless. Therefore, it is the part of Machu Picchu that they found in ruins. Again, I don't think that Machu Picchu was constructed over 25 years. It's probably hundreds of years because of the scale of the complex. You see the basic difference. Found these giant megalithic blocks. We decided to repair it by adding the smaller stones to the top part. You see the great difference between the giant stones on the bottom, the ones on top. The rough work on the top, the very fine work on the bottom. And here, this is another part of the megalithic aspect of Machu Picchu.
When we see Pleiadian shapes, we see a sphere of light, because the Merkaba moving so fast. The Atlantic.
Shut the fuck up, bro.
Here, again, relatively crude Inca work. What we can see is that a giant cataclysm struck Machu Picchu in the distant past, before Inca times, and pulled all of these stones apart. They used to fit perfectly together. So you can see the incredible level of craftsmanship here as compared to the rough work above here. Now this is the inside of this interesting three-sided structure. It never appears to have had a side. And here we see the cataclysmic damage. The right wall has sunken down by about 2 feet. That would require a huge earthquake. And now look at this very complex stone on the bottom. Number and the number of angles. I believe this stone on the bottom has approximately 22 angles, and the other stones three-dimensionally interlock with it. That is an incredible achievement. And here we're looking across to the other side of Machu Picchu. This is mainly Inca work, but here we see the megalithic work that was repaired and the wall that was pulled apart by a giant cataclysmic earthquake. And this mountain was shaped by the Inca, or this rock was shaped by the Inca to reflect the mountains in the background, which is quite curious. Reason unknown. Finally, this is the pinnacle of Machu Picchu. This is called the Hitching Post of the Sun, or the Intihuatana, and it was used as a calendar by the Inca people, not simply for the solstices and the equinoxes, but it was likely used every day of the year as a way to time and also compare time or days of the year with crop production in the local area and beyond. So this is not simply a stone, this is the top of the mountain itself. And each angle, top part, points to one of the 4 mountains in the background. As in here, it's pointing to Machu Picchu Mountain.
got this.
We're good.
The more challenging the journey.
That's crazy. He said it's not just simply a carved rock, it's the top of the mountain. Like, they came all the way up here and carved the top of the mountain down to look a certain way and be shaped a certain way. And who the fuck thinks to do some shit like that?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by DraftKings. DraftKings.com, America's favorite one-week fantasy football site where you can win enormous cash prizes every week. You've already researched the plays for your season-long fantasy team, especially if you're like Jamie and you're a serious dork about it. Turn that knowledge into instant cash at DraftKings.com. Last year, these are real numbers, one player turned $11 into $4,000 in one weekend. Another player won $100,000 his first time ever playing, and another player won $1 million in one day, just playing fantasy football. I used to think fantasy football was ridiculous, but now I'm starting to understand it. It's like when I found out how much poker players made. I went, whoa, wait a minute. I said, poker? What? They're playing cards? Like a bunch of little kids? No, they're making stupid amounts of money playing fantasy football. That's real. I can't believe it. Like men, yeah. Keep your season-long league where it is. But also play one-week fantasy at DraftKings.com to win huge cash this weekend. Hurry. Get your entry into the millionaire. This is coming. Deeper states.
Yes.
But the first time it's very alien. It's so odd, and you also kind of bump against the sides. And you have to.
Yeah, I've just seen Crash's African masks as well.
Yeah, he probably shouldn't show you those before you go into total darkness in a meat locker.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But the second day so much better, and so much so it's made me think maybe I should get myself a float thing.
Oh, you definitely should. It's huge. I love having one. I love knowing that anytime I want to go in there, I could just go in there.
Are they loads and loads of money, or are they okay?
Yeah, they're loads and loads of money. Yeah,
well,
they're not
thousands
cheap.
and thousands of dollars.
Yeah, especially the Flash ones,
Mm-hmm.
the Crash ones rather. The original one that I got, which was a tank, I think that was like $6,000 or $7,000.
Mm-hmm.
But Crashes are more like $30.
Okay, because this
It's
is
like
like
a car.
Room.
Yeah,
it's like buying a car.
And it's also it has these incredible filters that it's set up through. Like he has it set up like the one that I have in my house. I'm the only one who goes in it, but it's a commercial grade filtration system.
Right.
Like he filters things through ozone. There's all these different various steps that it takes. He's written like an entire I don't know how many pages, probably like 50 or 60 page booklet on the necessity for different types of filtration and what he needs. I mean, he's an obsessive guy.
Yes.
And his obsession with tanks has made. There's a guy in Austin that has some really amazing tanks too. That does it a little bit differently. He does it through a company that makes boats, and his are really excellent too.
Right.
But Crash is like the leader of the pack.
He's
Crash
the master
started it out.
He's the master of the game.
There was nothing like his stuff when his stuff came out. Now there's guys like the guy in Austin that is elevating his. And I spent some time there and checked out his facility. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
He's friends with my friend Aubrey, but the what Crash did was there was no innovation going on in the United States when it came to float technology. There was like the standard Samadhi tank, which is really great. I mean, it's cool. You could definitely get a cool experience in it.
Right.
And then there's some home models that a few people had. But what he did is he just took everything to the next level.
Yeah.
He made everything these steel modular boxes that it fits together perfectly, more sound deadening, more insulation, better filtration system, stronger reinforced sides, because the Samadhi ones would kind of bow out on the sides a little bit from the water, and sometimes they would rot, and like you had to get things replaced. He fixed everything. Yeah. He fixed. There was an issue with the linings would burn out sometimes because of the heat pads. The heat pads would short out. It would burn through the linings, and they would leak water everywhere. Right. He fixed that by, first of all, by setting like this redundant system and having 2 heat pads too, so if one burns out, you have a second one ready to go. And then secondly, he put these thick pond filters. Yeah. He doesn't use like the same kind of filters that a lot of people do. Not filters, rather, liners. Right. His liners are very thick. They're for like koi ponds. Okay. So he's done a lot of innovation. He's really figured out a lot of different things.
It's the place to go if you're lucky enough to live in LA.
Well, it's also if you're lucky enough to be able to get in now, because now he's booked way in advance.
Well, that's what I found. I mean, I wrote to him at least 4 weeks ago, and there were just no slots available during the day. That's why he gave me the 2 midnight slots. Although actually, I'm really glad he gave me the midnight slots.
That's the way to do it. Yeah. Late at night's the way to do it.
But I understand he's opening a new unit in Westwood.
Yes.
Where there'll be 7.
Yeah, that's not enough.
No,
even 7's not enough. I mean, you could open up one somewhere that has 50, and that sucker would be filled all day.
It would be filled.
20 million people in LA.
So there's not so many other people doing this in LA right now?
There's a few. I think people are starting to become aware of it now. It's
a fabulous experience. We all need this experience. One question I have and wonder about, what about if you have a joint before you get in, or take some psilocybin? What would that do?
I don't know what it's like to not do that before you go in.
You do that every time. Yeah.
Not psilocybin, but I have. But the pot is the edibles are the way to go for me.
Okay. So you eat about an hour before.
A terrifying supply of edibles, a terrifying dose, where you're just like, oh, what do I do? And then I get in there. That's what I like to do.
Okay, that's what I'd like to do as well if I hadn't given up pot 3 years ago.
Makes me very humble. There's something about getting in there. Just and because I've done it so many times, because I have the tank in my house, I'm super comfortable. I can get relaxed with floating. It's a normal thing to me. So when you're on the edibles too, it takes you to these really, really, really bizarre places.
No moments of paranoia or fear. You're just calm there.
I wouldn't say that. I'm pretty good with that though. If I had real problems with paranoia and fear, I wouldn't be able to do everything I do for a living.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Everything I do,
absolutely.
This is live.
Yeah.
Everything I do when I do commentary for the UFC, that's live. Stand-up is live.
Very edgy.
Yeah. All these things are all live, and they all depend on maintaining your sanity.
Yeah.
Under sometimes pretty intense pressure. But so I don't have those paranoia or fear issues, but I certainly feel the thoughts. I just don't indulge them. I feel the thoughts, but it's like a lot of
not indulge them.
Yeah, it's like a lot of psychedelic experiences. It's a matter of controlling the mindset, and I kind of equate it to just the ability to communicate on the internet and the ability to access information on the internet. Has led us to this weird place where if you wanted to, your day could be filled with horror. You could just go every day to the worst possible websites and see the most horrific videos and the most horrific photographs and see the world in the worst possible light. If you chose to just immerse yourself.
Or just watch the news.
Yeah. Even worse than the news. If you really wanted to really change the way you saw the world.
Yeah.
You could live on a beautiful tree-lined street with the nicest neighbors and the cutest little dogs barking, and the life looks beautiful.
Yeah.
But through the portal that is the internet, you can immerse yourself in the most twisted, sadistic minds, and it's like you have this decision to not do that.
Yeah.
And that's in sort of reinforcing that decision and making those choices, you build up your resistance to doing things that are negative. You build up your resistance to indulging in. And in that sense, I think it's good. Like, one of the weirdest things is, have you ever seen someone who's never been in any sort of a conflict type situation, but they get thrown into one and they have a panic attack, and they hyperventilate and they don't know what to do? It's very weird. I've seen it happen many times.
I've seen it happen.
And then I've seen other people that are in panic situations or rather high stress situations a lot, and they know how to stay calm and keep cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
sometimes your life can depend on it.
Sure, very much
panic
so.
Is a killer. I mean,
yes.
Scuba diving, which I did a lot of, panic will kill you.
Oh, I would imagine. I'm terrified of scuba diving. I've never done it.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that being 100 feet down in the ocean where the winds are moving, the currents banging you against rocks and stuff.
Absolutely.
That's got to be.
You lose it down there, and you're really gone.
Yeah. That's a whole other world. I did some snorkeling recently with dolphins.
Right.
I was in Hawaii, and I actually did it with my 4-year-old too. I took her with me into the water, and she had the mask on and everything, and she's like looking down, and we're seeing the dolphins swimming under us. It was amazing, really incredibly rewarding.
Did they come and scan you?
No, they didn't, but they just swam underneath us.
Right.
They really didn't give a shit about us. It was really kind of...
What are those weird-looking things up there?
They just, it's kind of... it's an eye-opener, like how little of a shit dolphins care. Yes. They don't care about you, man. As long as you're not trying to capture them, they're like, more people, whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly. Avoid the boat, Yeah. They came near the boat. I've been around them, though, when they're very playful, too. Like, we were fishing once, and they were jumping by the boat and being really playful with us. This was a totally different experience. This was, they just pretty much indifferent, but so beautiful. Like, just being around them, hundreds of dolphins.
Yeah.
And you're just looking at them swimming underneath you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can imagine that panic in that world.
Well, something goes wrong, at depth in a current. If you panic, you literally are dead. That's when you have to stay steady, and that's the power of the mind. You have to. It's mind over matter. You have to impose your mind on that situation, because I don't know why actually, if we have all this evolution, why we panic. I mean, they would have thought millions of years of evolution would have got rid of that terrible, dangerous thing called panic, but actually it's there.
Fight or flight, though, is so necessary. It sharpens your reflexes. It's one of the things about fighters is that a fighter going into a fight and not being nervous can be incredibly dangerous.
Yes.
And when I was competing, there were moments that I was too confident, and I went in and I couldn't compete right. I couldn't, and I also couldn't snap myself out of it.
Right.
Like, there's a level that you achieve when you're really nervous and you're not sure of what the outcome is going to be. There's like a level of reaction and of intensity that you achieve when you go into a competition where you're scared, where you perform so much better.
Right.
And then there's like when you're super confident, there's something that happens where you're not nervous at all. You can't get up for it. Like it's a weird thing that happens.
Right.
So that adrenaline I think it's a necessary component. It gives you that extra charge. It's just about managing that, and managing it is very difficult.
It was interesting. I told you a few moments ago, I watched this Hickson Gracie movie called Choke.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that he said quite early on in the movie. He said actually he's always afraid. He doesn't say I am a fearless person. He says I'm always afraid.
Yeah.
It's managing. It's managing that. What a formidable fighter that guy.
He's an amazing guy too. We had him on the podcast recently. Him and my friend Eddie Bravo together. It was just a huge treat for me as a lifelong martial arts practitioner and fan, because he's a real master. Fascinating guy.
Yeah.
That documentary, I recommend that to everybody, even people that don't do martial arts, like yourself. How did you hear about it?
Okay, well, my son-in-law, Jason Saris, does mixed martial arts. He does particularly Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at a place called the MMA Clinic in London. And he does it 3-4 times a week. He's very, very, very devoted to it. And he's been talking me through a lot of these issues over the last year. And I get it. I get why he loves it. And I think it's a really great thing for him. And I think it's a really great thing for anybody. There was a time in my life when I did do a martial art. I did Aikido. I got to brown belt in my very early 20s, and then I quit. I'm not quite sure why. I traveled. I went away. I
Stop!
The practice.
What the fuck?
And then in my 40s, I went back to it, and I worked my way back up to green belt. But Aikido is a different thing from this real grappling. I mean, this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, what I see is two people who are interlocked.
Is it a Rolex?
They're sensing
maybe
each other's movements all the time. You can't predict what's going to happen next in any way. And I understand that it's a kind of meditative thing also. That if you actually start thinking, I imagine, because I don't do it, but this is what my son-in-law tells me. If you start thinking while you're in there, in that grapple with that other very strong, very dangerous person, I don't think that's really good. I think you have to not be thinking. You have to be acting somehow on muscle memory, on instinct, on experience. You're not really thinking through your next move, or are you? I don't know.
Sometimes you're thinking, but a lot of times you are reacting in what you try to do is achieve sort of a Zen state, a flow state. And when you're at your best, you're in that flow state, where sometimes you'll be in a position where you don't even realize how you achieve the position. You instinctively did it. And it's instinctive based on thousands of repetitions, many hours of mat time. Mat time is very important. Mat time being the actual sparring itself. Because the rolling, the grappling, sparring, you understand like the language of human interaction. Like there's an interaction between a person attacking, a person defending, and there's just like this thing that goes on where you kind of figure out.
And this is something that in daily life, in our modern technological society, most people have no experience of at all. They're never in a fight situation. They're never ever having to deal with that. So if they suddenly find themselves in a situation of danger, attacked on the street, they're not going to have the faintest idea what to do.
No, well, hopefully that never comes up anyway.
Not,
but the benefits extend outside of that, in my opinion. The benefits are, it prepares you for like the drama of regular life pales in comparison to the real drama of training and of competing inside the gymnasium. Like, because essentially every time someone does jiu-jitsu, they're competing. Every time you spar, even if you spar with a very good friend, you're still competing. You know, you get used to this struggle, and that's something that most people don't have in their life. And in having that struggle and in this competition, it makes the regular stress that people go through, the stress of bills and of relationships, and it alleviates and mitigates a lot of the issues that people have. Because the life or death struggle of someone trying to choke you and you battling it out, and you're tired, you're exhausted, and you're trying to remain calm and catch your breath and defend and trying to stay cool and trying to figure out what's the proper defense for this situation and how to turn this around and how to get back to a better spot. It's so harrowing and it's so stressful, but in a good way.
So you're totally in the moment.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Totally in the moment.
You're
There's
not
no
thinking
time for
about
any other shit.
Some girl you dated when you were in high school. Where's she now? You're not thinking about that. You know,
or the bills you got to pay, or anything like that.
No, you're not thinking about any of those things. And in that sense, it is very meditative. It alleviates a lot of the stress of life. And then when it's over, you just you feel very relaxed because you've spent all this excess energy that I believe people. I mean, it's not a scientific way of looking at the human body, but I think of the human body in a lot of ways as sort of like a battery. And a lot of people's batteries are sort of overflowing with juice because you don't use them. You sit down in a sedentary state in front of a computer all day, which is pretty bad for your back, and you stare at a screen and you do your work, and then you sit in your car or on the train or whatever to get home, and then you sit in front of the television. That's a lot of people's lives.
Absolutely.
That's not normal for a body. The body is supposed to be moving while you're young and alive, and while you have energy. You're supposed to be, your body wants to be involved in activities. Your body wants to go hiking and do things, and if it doesn't, it atrophies and it shrivels up and it stops being functional. And when you can get all that energy out in a training session, it does a couple things. One, it strengthens your body so that if you ever do have to use it for something, even if something as simple as like picking things up or just strength to help move something, you have that. But two, you alleviate all the excess energy. You drain the battery a bit. And by draining the battery, you put more juice in the battery for the future. Like the battery has like a higher threshold. And then you also you can deal with stuff easier. Like when I don't train, if I don't exercise, if I don't do some sort of rigorous physical exercise, like at least a few days a week, I react differently to stress.
You start getting snappish and...
Well, I get more irritated than I should. It affects me more than it should. But when when I train, like if I train a lot, everything is pretty easy.
Yeah.
You know?
I've seen this effect on my son-in-law.
Mm.
His couple of years now doing this, it's really transformed him. It's a really, really great thing. And I wish
People can benefit from it.
I mean, I'm 64 years old. I don't know. I don't think I can go and do that stuff now. I don't
You
know.
could if you found another 64-year-old.
Yeah. Okay. Or I could work with one personal teacher.
Mhm.
You know, to who would understand my level. I see huge advantages in doing it. I think I've got more and more interested in it over the last couple of years. It's a really fascinating thing. And also, tell me about this. I mean, in a way, you're being a warrior in there. Also, in a way, it's a warrior thing. I mean, this is a contentious issue. The human race, we've been around in anatomically modern form for the last 200,000 years. For a lot of that time, our young men in many societies have been called to warfare in one form or another. I would say that it's gone on long enough for it to be a fundamental part of the human experience, actually. In our society today, a lot has worked to move that aside, and probably that's a very good thing. Although we still do have war, of course, but it's done at a distance largely. It's not. I mean, I'm writing novels about the Spanish conquest of Mexico at the moment. I am I'm getting inside the heads of warriors, and those guys are on the battlefield hand to hand with edged weapons. That kind of experience of battle and warfare doesn't happen, I think, much in modern warfare today. It's more the guy remotely piloting a drone and shooting people from a distance. But maybe there is a warrior need in us which can be met in a harmless and positive way on the mat in something like mixed martial arts. That's what I'm coming to. Would you agree with that?
It's very possible that there's something to that. I think that it's very possible that there's something to the idea that we have ingrained in us a certain amount of experiences based on the genetics of all the people that have lived before us, and that whatever fight or flight is inside of us, whatever, I mean, throughout history, like I've been discussing this with friends, like how fascinating this time is, because throughout history, in the past, if a boat of strangers showed up, it was very dangerous.
Yeah.
A boat showed up and you're like, but get crazy. A bunch of men, women, and children. And now when a boat shows up, it's tourism, and everybody gets excited. Like, oh, we need their money.
Yeah.
Come on, come to this island. Come to this place.
Yes.
Bring your family.
Yes.
It's a completely different world that we live in.
It is.
And those experiences that led the human race in 2014, these experiences of people, pirates showing up and Vikings showing up and all those dangerous people showing up in these different places, people coming over the hill, an army's coming. That was just a part of being a human being for the longest time.
For a very long time. Yeah.
Have you seen this new thing that was going on about the autopsy of which king of England?
Richard II or Richard III.
Yeah, they found his bones, which is really amazing, man. Yeah. They found his bones, they found it under like a parking lot or something like that?
Yeah, parking lot, yeah.
How crazy is that, man?
I know.
How do they know it's him?
I think that there's a long tradition regarding him and the battle that he was killed in, and there's even a Shakespeare play where he's at the end of the battle saying famously, my horse, a horse, my kingdom for a horse, so that he can flee. But it seems that he died in face-to-face combat and was hacked to pieces, as far as I can tell.
One of the last of the kings to die like that too, right?
To die in combat, yeah. We're in the sort of late 1400s there. I would say so. I mean, combat went on. The period I'm writing about, early 1500s, was brutal and bloody period. A man like Hernan Cortez is a leader, but he's a killer. He's a cold-blooded killer. I think that kind of experience is rare today.
Does it freak you out when you read stuff about like these days and realize that all could happen today? We need the wrong set of events to take place. We're not far removed as a species from that time. In terms of actual history, like it's the blink of an eye between then and now.
Absolute blink of an eye. We are the same people. Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
there's been some social changes. But look, we're still slaughtering people on large scale levels. It's just that hand-to-hand, face-to-face thing, technology has intervened a little bit in that. If our society were to go into a radical collapse, people could find themselves facing those contingencies very quickly, very, very, very rapidly.
And it is, in fact, in a radical collapse in other parts of the world. I've been talking about this on stage a lot lately, because there's a lot of these. There's this Duck Dynasty guy. It's hilarious. It's Duck Dynasty's this ridiculous American reality show.
Okay.
But one of the main guys on Duck Dynasty, he gave this speech, this video speech, where he was talking about the impending apocalypse and what they call the rapture, where Christians think that Jesus is going to come and he's going to take away everybody that's Christian and bring them to heaven, and everybody else is going to be stuck on earth.
I believe there's a very elite group are going to go. 144,000 of them are going to be floated.
Is that what the idea is?
Apparently so, yeah, with the rapture.
And he told people that they should watch this Nicolas Cage movie that's about to come out called Left Behind, that's based on this very famous series of books amongst the Christians, Left Behind.
Okay.
And like these people have
You
this.
mean
Like,
he's somebody who doesn't get raptured? Is that the idea?
I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's so fucking stupid. It's so stupid. It hurts my brain to talk about it. But what's fascinating is that they're all worried about. Everyone's worried about the apocalypse.
Yes.
The apocalypse, the end. But the apocalypse, if you go to certain parts of the world, it's there.
It's there.
It's in Liberia right now.
It's in Somalia right now.
Right now.
Listen, back in the 1970s, I lived in Mogadishu. I lived in Somalia. I lived in that failed state. It was a fine place then.
Back then it was fine.
Yeah, it was fine. And why was it fine? I mean, this is not politically correct, but it was run by a dictator. And he kept things calm,
that has been the case in many unfortunate scenarios. That's what's argued about Iraq. If you looked at Iraq before the U.S. invasion, it was largely superior to what it is now.
Vastly superior to what it is now. Again, we're not, kind of not supposed to say these things.
Right.
Honestly, for the average Iraqi living in Iraq, things were a whole lot better under Saddam Hussein. It was peaceful. There was not a lot of interreligious conflict.
It was a secular state.
It was a secular state, in fact, quite tolerant, and all you had to do was not get in the face of Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
That was the simple rule of life. Just don't get in the face of Saddam Hussein, and that was the simple rule of life in Somalia in the 1970s. Don't get in the face of Siad Barre. If you do, I'll tell you a story. Mohammed Siad Barre was the president of Somalia when I went there in 1975. He did a number of interesting things. For example, the Somali language was not written. This was a nomadic society, 70% nomadic. He introduced a written script for the Somali language based on the Latin alphabet. This had not been possible before because religious leaders had said they had to have it in the Arabic script because they were Muslims. He just forced that through. Then he introduced a family law which allowed women to divorce their husbands. At that point, 11 religious leaders, 11 sheikhs, mobilized the public and said they had to rebel against Siad Barre. Well, what he did, he hauled those guys out of the mosque the very same day and shot them all. And that was the end of that argument. And suddenly women could divorce their husbands, and the society was very free and very open. One can't imagine today, from the scenes of horror that we see from Mogadishu, actually how peaceful it was. So, it may be the case that in some situations, and Iraq is definitely another example, we in the West are constantly saying we must have democracy. Democracy is a great thing. Well, maybe it is a great thing at a certain point, at a certain level. When you're in a society that's very sectarian, very divided into tribal interests, very divided into different religious groups, maybe it's actually more comfortable if you have a dictator.
Well, there's a power vacuum issue. I think the issue is civilizations largely operate on momentum.
Yeah.
And when things have been set up in the way that they have been in Iraq, or the way they have been obviously in Somalia, where there's one guy who's calling all the shots, and they kind of got this whole thing established. When that guy's not there anymore, and then everyone's scrambling to be the new guy,
everyone's scrambling.
It creates chaos. It's horrific.
And hell.
And it creates this intense violence amongst the people, like Iraq. The people that are in that civil war state that they're at now, where various sections of their population are vying for control of this failed state. It's horrific.
It's horrific. You have this hideous death cult called the Islamic State,
Yeah.
Which may or may not have been initially funded and set up by the United States of America and its allies. Who knows? Who knows? But it's a death cult, and it's horrible. Frankly, I would rather have Saddam Hussein than the Islamic State.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing to say, right? The one evil is better than the other evil. Because obviously we're only talking in objective reality terms here. We're not like saying, hey, it's okay to be a dictator.
No, not at all.
It's evil to be a dictator. Clearly,
it's evil.
Saddam Hussein is a terrible person.
It's evil and wrong, and we don't. Ideally, we move to a situation where we have no governments and where people run their own lives and peacefully negotiate with one another. But that isn't the way it's going down in Iraq, and it's not the way it's gone down in the southern part of Somalia.
Yeah, that would be ideal, right? But it's really hard to run a bunch of people. Like the idea of a society, the idea of taking 1 million people, 500 million people, whatever the number is, and having a group of people that adhere to the best interests of all the folks that are in that society, when their needs are so varied, their resources are so varied, their fortune and what situation they find themselves born into is so varied. And then you have the people that are fortunate sons and daughters that are trying to keep the unfortunate from getting into their gated community of life. There's so much craziness.
And you can be sure that dictators' sons and daughters are all very well looked after in a dictatorship. That always happens, like Saddam's kids, like Siad Barre's kids. It's always the case, that they are. And that then generates feelings of anger and fury that is happening. A situation where just bullets are flying down the street constantly, and you live in permanent fear of your life. That's not good either.
Yeah, the arguments that the United States has funded ISIS in order to build up support for an invasion of Saudi Arabia or of Syria, rather, are really terrifying. And more terrifying because I don't want to look into it, because I don't want to know.
It's a horrible thought. Yeah.
It's like, I don't even want to know. I know that kind of shit has happened before. So when you see that it's happening now, you're like, oh, fuck. Is this really going on?
Yeah.
Like, is that really what's causing all this?
It's profoundly depressing. And the problem is that we can't really believe anything that our political leaders in the West say. I mean, they have been proven to be absolute crooks, thieves, and liars. They lie by instinct all the time, and the problem with constant lying.
Graham Hancock. All right, I'm gonna get out of here. But we did get a good bit done. So we started to tighten up the jewelry a little bit. Got some details going on the watch. So next thing is the shirt. Yes, sir. Start working on that shirt tomorrow. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I could probably finish this shit over the weekend. Might be able to have this done by the weekend. Alright. Appreciate y'all chilling in the studio with me. Catch you next time.